Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Two Dads One Car where we talk about modern fatherhood. My friends, I am currently in sunny California. We're doing another episode abroad. And I guess it's abroad if you're from Canada, but if you're in the US, this is not really abroad. Side tangent, but I'm bringing into the car someone I've wanted on the podcast for a long time, actually even before the podcast started. He's actually I would say a personal coach of mine. He's someone who has really changed the way I approach my story, my mindset, and really diving deep into who we are. He's a well-known name in the industry as well. He is none other than Rudhir Krishtel. He's changed so many lives of us who are going through the profession, especially those who are mid-career lawyers trying to discover their voice and their story. And man, this is gonna be a fun conversation. So with that, I'm gonna be picking him up very shortly. He is just down the street and we'll have him in the car very shortly. Thanks. Rudhir, I did an introduction to you earlier before you jumped into the car, but why don't you give us like a snapshot of your family?
Okay.
Number of kids, rough age, and we'll just start from there.
Yes, so my family starts with my wife, and we've been married for, I feel like 10 years, and so long enough time where you stop counting, you start tracking. My son is 7, and that's our family. That's the whole situation. And then obviously, immediate family. That's a big part of our tribe. And my sister's sibling, mine, our parents. But our immediate family is my wife's sister, and my sister, and my parents, our parents. So.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier, it's been a dream of mine to have you on this podcast and have you sitting here. So I'm so thrilled just because you've made such a difference in my approach in my life and in terms of even this podcast too. So we'll kind of dive into that. But one question I love to start off with, and whatever comes to mind, what is an unspoken truth about parenting? Something that's not shared as widely that you're like, man, I wish this was even more obvious, when you started or even now. And so there's no right or wrong answer, but I'd love to get your take on that.
There are many unsaid truths about parenting. The thing that comes up for me a lot is that there is sort of this natural way in which I was raised to parent, and it's essentially just the way that I was parented. And oftentimes that really gets in your way. And so the way that you were raised might not be necessarily, so much of it is the way that you want to parent. So much of it you want to challenge, and I just feel like that is an unsaid piece, which is you get raised to parent in a certain way, and that's not always the way that you want to parent. And there's a constant conflict that I kind of walk up against there, and I'd love to talk about that more.
Yeah, how do you navigate that tension?
It's really hard, and I got to tell you,
Please.
in my situation, I have had to build, and I'm sure all parents do, I have to build parenting skills and techniques that are way outside of my natural tendency. I love kids. With my son, 0 to 2, when he was 0 to 2, that was my sweet spot, having just a baby sit in your arms and, just that early connecting and bonding. I love that period. And then as soon as he got into the era of no, some people call it three-nager or whatever comes out, it wasn't a terrible 2 for us. It was like three-nager and then 4 where he was becoming more clear, more obstinate. We'd butt up against each other. And it's learning how to go against my natural tendency, which is much more nurturing, much more caring. And then being a boundary setter myself with my son is... even as I say it now, I get shaky because it's not an easy thing. And so it's not the way that I connect with people. It's not the way I relate with people. And it's actually the parenting style that I wanted to challenge, because my dad was a very authoritative individual. And me, I'm a very relational, personable individual. And I find that the most valuable tool that I have as a parent is learning how to be more authoritative like my dad, which is not my natural tendency, but it's actually what my son needs a lot of from me is structure. And so it's this ongoing sort of learning, kind of going outside of my comfort zone, parenting in ways that aren't necessarily natural for me, but it proves out a lot of value, or it has when I can do it.
I resonate with that a lot, Rudhir.
Yeah, what about
that? My daughter is 3.5. I think she is going through the three-nager side, right? Like, it's like, no means no.
Yeah.
I said no,
Yeah.
right? And similarly, it is that nurturing, like that is the authoritative. I'm sure my wife would laugh at this. It's not my natural instinct.
My son, I'm like, go to the bathroom. He's like, my body, my choice. I was like, I don't think that's what they were talking about when they said that. Like, this is not going to work out. You got to go to the bathroom right now, man. And so it's really, it cracks me up, the things that the pushback. And anyway.
I mean, how do you play like with your partner? You guys play who does bad cop? Like, what does that look like in those dynamics?
I think we've realized our family functions better when I'm the bad cop. And I think we have, one rule is don't have two people trying to be the authority in the room at the same time, because it's too overpowering for a small human to have two larger humans telling him what to do or being, assertive or directional. It's just very intimidating. You just imagine if you had someone 2 or 3 times your size telling you what to do, and then there's 2 of them.
Yes.
It would be very hard for me. You and I have probably challenges with people that are our peers and our colleagues, let alone people that are 2 or 3x our size. And so I think my wife and I try to remember that if both of us are trying to be authoritative at the same time, it's not the best formula. It's not to say that we don't do it, but it's not the best formula. And so we definitely try to figure out in advance it's easier if you figure out in advance. More often than not, you can't.
Of course.
But if my wife chooses to kind of hold the line, then I might come in a bit more compassionate. Or if I'm choosing the line, my wife will come in caring. But luckily, we can both play that role. I mean, I think each of us is better at, some better than the other. And for me, it is naturally harder to be authoritative. I feel like I am channeling my dad, who growing up I had the most conflict with. And so here I am having to embody archetype of the person that I continue, or for a long time, had struggled with. And I love my father. Everyone who knows me knows that. And he passed away many years ago. And it's also, for lack of a choice of words, my biggest trigger. And so then if I'm trying to be like him and engage like him at times, it's not only an out-of-body experience, but it's also bringing stuff up for me that's challenging. And so I find it to be a drain, and yet I also find it to be one of the most valuable parenting techniques for me. So both are happening at the same time.
I mean, it kind of goes back to part of your work. It's like, okay, this is what I want to try. That's probably a little just over the comfort zone, right? But I mean, just to call back to what you said earlier, you mentioned that, when you are the authoritative figure, things tend to work out even better. And what is it about that you've noticed? Like, I'm curious to get your thoughts on what that means.
Each of us wants something different from the people around us. And if you think about it, in the context of work, because I do all of my coaching and all of my leadership work is in the context of working with high-performing individuals.
Yeah.
And some people like an authoritative boss. Some people like a relational one. Some people like someone who is, a mix of the two, different situations, different scenarios. And, with my son, he's clear. He wants clarity. He comes with high energy. He wants to be met with it. He's simple, direct, and assertive. He responds well to it.
Yes.
I'm naturally none of those things. It's just like, I'm much more laid back. Like I said, 0 to 2, it's all about cuddles. Like, I just want him in my arms. And, I'm softer than that, naturally, with children. And he needs me to be direct and clear at times, because he responds really well to it. He needs the clarity. Even if he puts up a fuss in the beginning, you can see he's much more grounded as a result of the clarity. He's much more responsive. He respects it more. And so then I have to balance the two a lot. And I want to move much more naturally into, oh, let him do what he wants to do. Oh, you know, it's all right if he skips that today, or, you know, let him go to sleep without changing into his pajamas. Like, it's not the end of the world. And that's kind of what my natural tendency is. But I realize that if I'm not structured with him and I don't hold him accountable, well, then other people, he may need that structure and authority elsewhere, and he might not get it, or he might not expect that from people, or he might not know how to relate and respond to that. And so I gotta show up in a range of ways, some of which are in my comfort zone and some of which are outside of them.
This is so fascinating to hear, and because I think I share similar sentiments, and I'm learning here as well too, right? But I think what you said earlier just sparked this idea is that you're playing with, not playing, but like you're catering based on the person you're speaking with, right? It's like that is, okay, this is what he needs and what he needs, and like how do we evolve as dads to meet that? And it's such a journey, isn't it? Like, it's
yeah, but Stephen, you and I have a pretty good relationship, and I relate to you in certain ways that are actually different than how I connect with others and how I interact with others. And I think that a lot of us in life, we code switch. You know, I don't find that to be inauthentic. I actually find it to be meeting the person where they are. How I talk to my grandparents is different than how I talk to my parents, is different than how I talk to my kids. If I talk to them all the same way, I don't know that it would be as functional. And so I think the same goes with different humans that you interact with. And it's not easy for us to learn because we tend to succeed in a certain way, and we think that that's necessarily the playbook, or we tend to have not appreciated a certain type of parenting, and so then we try to do the opposite. But I feel like we need many tools at our disposal. And so sometimes if we let certain tools by the wayside, we don't pick and choose them, they atrophy.
Yes.
And I think that I have to have compassion as a tool. I have to have understanding as a tool. I have to have clarity as a tool. I have to have directionality as a tool. And if I'm sort of missing one of those as a choice, then it shows up over time.
This is, I mean, I think that's just a great way of looking at it, right? These different tools in a tool belt. And just for context for the listeners, I mean, Rudhir, you've coached hundreds, thousands of people. You transform, like, I transform lives and changes our perspectives on the way that we interact, not just within the work setting, but also in our day-to-day. And so I think it's just fascinating to see that lens when it comes to parenting as well, too, right? And it's why even more deeply personal. Right?
It's hardest for me with parenting. You know, a lot of my work in some context feels spiritual to me. And it's building that real deep relationship and connection with yourself and others. And I find parenting to be a really valuable experience on the spiritual path. And that's to say, you get faced with some of your deepest challenges. You know, if you're facing it at work, I feel like it shows up in some way in parenting. If you're facing it with a colleague or you're facing it with a friend, it shows up in some way in the way that you relate to your family or your kid. And so I just find that these experiences that I have with my son, really enlightening, like really empowering, really powerful, and have allowed me to become a much better version of myself.
What was it like in the, you know, you mentioned that, call back to like the teenager period. I'm sure you're like, whoa, all right, no more like the cuddling. There's a pushback here. Like, I gotta switch. What was it like in that stage, and how did you navigate through, right? Because you mentioned like, okay, this is like a transition, right? Were there mentors you turned to, or you're like, okay, this is not working? Curious to get how your thought process and how you acted in those early stages.
I just handed him to my wife. Like, honestly, like I just was like, it's your turn. I would tap out more and tap her in more. And I think 0 to 2 was my era, and I would think that 3 to 5, you know, was hers.
Yeah.
And it was her strong suit because she's an incredible communicator. She's an incredible listener. She understands what he needs, and he's also very clear. And so, I mean, I think she was doing that from the beginning, but especially in those ages where it was harder for me, luckily it was a really natural fit for her. And now we're finding kind of new it just depends on the era, and different times require different approaches. He's much more physical now. He's active, he's energetic. I tend to be, running more with him, playing more with him, being more active, trying to burn his energy.
Yeah.
I find myself skiing, biking, swimming, running, stepping back into my own back problems. Like all of that, it's like a physical era. It's a physical time, and I feel like I'm tapping back in that way. My wife may be involved in other aspects of learning and nurturing. I am the engineer. My wife studying was more liberal arts. We're both lawyers, but it's interesting. She's the math teacher.
Oh, wow.
I would think I would be, but I have a certain way that's fixed, and here's how you learn. My son requires different approaches, and the schools are teaching things differently than how I learned it, and she's much more understanding, aware of his needs, flexible in the approach, and is able to meet him where he is. And I feel like his learning is much stronger under her than it is under me. And so each of us sort of picks a different battle and, takes on a different responsibility, and that's been really valuable.
And it's great that you have like no ego about this too, right? It's like, this is a peer that you might be better at and I'm not as good at, right? And like that is the key to like such a strong partnership that you have.
It's very humbling. It's very humbling. I can't say it was easy, and I can't say that our egos don't get hit along the way. Like, I can't believe he goes to you for that. The number of times we've had to have that conversation where, somebody does something and the other person gets offended. I think that's human, but I'm lucky to have a partner, where we're all in. I know a lot of folks have different parenting and partnership situations, but I'm lucky that, she's definitely incredible in so many ways, and then I'm able to tap in at times too, so it works out.
I mean, I'm sure a common question that you get that's related to this from your clients and the people you work with. Like, I mean, these are very, like, depending on different stages, some very, like, high-performing individuals, and I'm sure the question always comes up when it comes to navigating that with family. How do you typically approach those kind of questions, right? Because you mentioned that, parenting is one aspect of who we are. There's also the work side, there's the health side, personal side. So when that question comes up, like, how do you, does that come up? I'm guessing. I'm presuming here, but.
It certainly does. With my clients, I coach high-performing individuals. I coach mostly lawyers. And when it comes to lawyers, the people that are more senior tend to be practice group leaders, heads of firms, or heads of legal departments at companies. And they certainly are transitioning to, and then a lot of lawyers that are looking to grow their business and grow their practice. And I think when you start getting into these more complex stages of your practice where you go beyond expertise and you start to get into the world of leadership and management and organizational growth, et cetera, time becomes a factor.
Yeah.
How can I loop these, where do I get time to do all of these things on top of my day-to-day work? And parenting and families are certainly a part of that. Most of the people that I work with have some, significant aspect of family that's a part of their day-to-day life. And so we talk a lot about the resources that you need to take on, the tools that you need to take on to get the support you need to make sure that you have time for all of these things. And for me, with the people that I tend to work with, they have some incredible expertise or skill that they offer to the world, oftentimes legal. Well, I tend to encourage people to really spend their time in their highest and best use, the thing that they really love and gives them the most energy, and then delegate, get resources, and get support from the people where they need it, meaning there are other experts and other people that you can lean on for the things that that's not your main function. And a lot of people have trouble delegating, trusting other people, holding other people accountable. And so when you work on those skills, they benefit you both personally and professionally. People need resources, they need a community to raise and help support and raise their family, and being able to enlist that and nurture that and generate that takes effort, but it's worth it.
And also, like, I think what I take away from that is also the willingness to raise your hand and say, hey, I need some help here, right? Like, and it's like, I am having a tough time. right?
And that's not easy for people that
Yeah.
I work with who tend to be perfectionists, who tend to think they can take care of everything and handle
That's me.
everything. Right. And
me.
so you really do want to, again, it's humbling
Yeah.
that you need help. Nothing of significance in the world happens alone. Not a single thing of significance happens alone. And at that point, you realize pretty quickly, I need help, I need support, I need to be able to coordinate it, communicate through it, manage it. And oftentimes those skills are valuable, certainly at home and even in people's professional life.
In your work, Rudhir, I mean, I'm sure part of it requires a lot of travel and a lot of off-sites. I mean, how do you navigate your practice, right? From your business beyond, because like there's people who are listening who also may be managing their own businesses, their own practices. What goes into your mindset when it comes to how do you navigate that kind of scheduling, right?
Yeah.
Especially with demands at home rising, I'm sure, depending on the age. Curious to know what goes in your mind.
I think, a lot in the last many years. We went through the pandemic, and then we went through life after the pandemic, and then there's adjustment, obviously, with the size of your family, the age of your child, and where your family is. And so all of those, the way that I do it, or the way that we do it in our family, is that probably every quarter, if not every 6 months, and definitely every year, my wife and I sit down and we look ahead and we say, what are the needs right now? And how do we adjust? And the playbook adjusts often.
Yeah.
And the resources adjust often. And I think it's having that conversation that's more important, because on some years you might have more lease to travel and some years less. On some years you might be more work focused and on some years less. On some years you might choose to focus on one partner's work versus the others. But I think getting on the same page in my life with my wife is the most important dialogue. And then we can decide how many flights are happening a month or in the next 6 months, and how much time to be dedicating to work versus family. And we just got to get on the same page on it. And it's a hard conversation, but it's like the hard conversation we want to have regularly.
I think that has been one of my takeaways chatting with you today, but also in the past, is that sometimes there are these hard conversations that we know inside we need to have. And the more that we delay it, the worse it becomes. And this is one of them, right? It's like, all right, let's just do a check-in, right? Like, what does it look like next little bit? And being that open, receptive to that kind of discussion.
We have to do that all the time. We have a regular meeting in our family about finances. We do that once a week. We have a meeting once a week about action items and purchases. And that's just how we function as a family. And so my wife and I are regularly cycling through that. And then every quarter, every 6 months, or at least once a year, we sit down with a journal and we just say, what's working right now, what's not working, what's the hard part, what's the good part. And on the hard part, luckily with 2 lawyers, we can solve problems. And it's just a matter of first at least articulating the problem, articulating the challenge. And then we have this way of thinking about the new system versus the old system.
Yeah.
And we learn that really early. And I think then it's realizing that every year you have to iterate into a newer system. And I think those conversations, and those difficult conversations, the more we have them, they're still hard. I would be lying, but it's the person that I'm closest to that I have the hardest conversations with. And that gives me then a lot of courage to step into hard conversations everywhere else.
Wow. Related to courage, but also maybe a pivot point. I know you're working on something, a book called Electric Fences, right? Love to hear more about it, and maybe some intersection with parenting in some sense, right?
Yeah, well, Electric Fences. So that's the title, and you like the title.
I love it.
What comes up for you when you hear that title? What are you thinking about?
It is that moment, that feeling you get inside when you're like, I should be saying something, I should be doing something, but like, let me hold off.
Yeah.
Right? Let me step back. But that on the other side of this electric fence is like opportunity.
You nailed it.
That's it.
You got to be talking about this book more, Stephen. This is
Let's
exactly
go.
right. And so we're in the stage where the book is going to be coming out soon. And this idea, Electric Fence, is the notion that came to me and through me with all of the coaching that I do, is that I find with high-performing individuals, there are these hesitation areas. You're so good at so many things. And so what people tend to do is they just do those things over and over again. But what got you here won't get you there. And so you can continue to work on your strengths and step into your strengths, but there's this area of hesitation. Let's say with my son, it's being more assertive. That's hard for me. Let's just say being more clear, you know, going from 0 to 180, as I tell him, you know, I'm at 0 right now, but if you're not listening, I'm gonna have to go to 60, and I'm gonna have to go to 180, and then I'm gonna get, you know, I'm gonna take it to the next level. And he kind of knows that this is coming. That's very hard for me.
Oh, yeah.
And that's my electric fence. Meaning if I hesitate, I could tell myself a story that, oh yeah, I don't like parenting that way because that's how my dad was, or I always saw parents do it that way. I'm gonna choose to do it differently. That's a story. It's not actually true, because sometimes, as I said, my son needs that clarity, and I'm choosing to not offer it to him. And I think what I've noticed in coaching, what I've noticed with the high performers that I work with, is they'll say, I'm not going to talk to my colleague about that because they're not going to react well. And I don't think that's a good strategy. And they think they're being strategic, but it's an electric fence. They're holding back from that conversation because they're hesitating inside, and they've built a little bit of a wall. And so this book is all about, first, knowing what you want, understanding what are some of the blockages in the way, and noticing how some of your own tendencies, your own hesitation, your hesitation to have the hard conversation, your hesitation to take that leap, to do the thing that makes you nervous, how that often is a barrier. And on the other side of that barrier is a door and a pathway to so much opportunity and potential. And people write themselves off from it. You and I have had these conversations actually 5 years ago when we started talking. There were things that you were hesitating on, holding yourself back on. You're a strong leader, you have strong natural leadership tendencies, but there are certain things that you were hesitating on. And now I notice regularly you step in and step up to things that you might have felt nervous about or challenged about, this podcast included.
Yes.
You know, there are things that you are now doing and choosing to doing, stepping up, you know, playing a bigger game, planting yourself in a bigger pot. And I feel like you have a personal sense of what these fences look like and what happens when they come down.
It is, absolutely, right? And I think in the past 5 years, it's like, all right, I know this is a fence, and I know that if I step into it, right, it is that initial step over. Like, that's where the magic can happen, even touching upon sensitive topics on this podcast, right? I know it might not be the most popular one, but like things like, you know, like fostering kids, things like IVF treatments, things like growing up without a father, like diving into those topics, of course, like with my guest permission and as we kind of go through, but it is sometimes these stories that it's like, wow, okay, I did that, right? And how it shows up afterwards, I don't know, but I think there's something there. There's that fence. You're like, okay, let's try this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think I certainly know it's meaningful personally, and the book is written as a professional tool, but in people's, you know, home lives and personal lives, I feel like we hesitate. You know, one good example is at home. There was a time, you know, when my wife and I started dating, and even after we got married, where she noticed, she probably says this better than I do, but I would take such a high level of responsibility at work on managing, on leading, on stepping towards challenges. But then at home, I would probably take a bit of a back seat. She was leading and I was sort of following, and that meant a lot of the responsibility was falling on her. And she would, you know, remind me, she's like, you take leadership at work, but why not take that level of leadership at home? And I think there was a fence there. There was a barrier because I was raised and used to all of the home things being managed by others, and it wasn't my responsibility. And I think in the last many years, you know, I've evolved on that. I've tried to evolve on that. Hopefully, my wife thinks so, but I try to step in and step up in ways that I might not have in the past. And I think it makes a huge difference. But there are these barriers that we create. I do this, I choose not to do that. And I just wonder if it's a choice or if it's a story that we tell ourselves. And so this book is really offering tools on ways to recognize it and sort of work through that over time.
I resonate with that, and I think that actually calls out to a recent discussion I had with my wife a couple of weeks ago when she's like, Stephen, you at work, you have this energy. When you're a nonprofit, you have this positive energy, but when you come home, like sometimes that disappears, right? You're just oh, you're just gassed.
We're getting family Steve instead of like work Steve. What's going on there?
It's like, okay, you know what? You're right? It's maybe I am not bringing my full self at home, right? And I was like, hey, what is something that can help with this? Maybe I need to build in transition time, right? Build in time to have that recharge moment.
Yeah.
But it was like sometimes those who are closest to you give you the most tangible feedback to make us better.
We need our recharge moments. I think it's nice that family is yours and certainly mine. And I also then need to step it up at times, and that's what I've learned is that this is a step up moment. Here's the moment where I need to say I need a break and I need to relax, but that can't be all the time. And so I have to sort of figure out how to balance that. Family for me growing up was a place to relax, was a place to unwind. And now it's a place of significant, responsibility, and I got to step up into it. So I try to treat, my family with that highest level of engagement as much as possible. It's definitely not there all the time. It's definitely not there a lot. But when I do, I realize, I want to give them what I give to my work and what I give to my professional life. And, I hope that I do more of it that way.
Well, I mean, I'm so excited to read the book when it comes out. I'm so excited to share it as it goes widely and to kind of see where it applies. But man, Rudhir, it's been such a pleasure. If I could end on the last question, because I know, of course, timing's tight. We're going to do pick up, drop off. Last question I have for you. What is something that you're excited about this next chapter, this next phase of fatherhood for you?
I think every chapter, dialing back into presence with my family, dialing back into meaningful relationship. The neat thing about raising a child is every few months, every 6 months, I get to see, I get to be more connected with the human that I met when he was born, but I also get to meet a newer version of him over time. And so you get to meet a new person, you get to meet an evolving individual, and you have to learn to be present with that person, present with yourself, present with them, and then also just deepening a connection that I've been forming for a long time. So I keep getting excited about that. Every year, my wife and I meet and we think about who he was this last year and who's he going to be, and we sort of mourn the old version and we get excited about the new one, and I'm always excited about the next phase.
That's amazing, Rudhir. I am so grateful for you that we made time to have this discussion here. Grateful for the stories you share, the impact you've made on my life and many others, and even just having this conversation, it's just like, okay, a lot of takeaways. I'll share this in a debrief afterwards, but appreciate you. This has been such a joy.
Fantastic.
A joy, man.
Thank you so much.
Love it.
Great. Thanks.
All right, that's a wrap. Thank you, Rudhir, for being on the podcast. I am so grateful for you and for your time. I know it's tight, but like the fact that we had a chance to dive into this together has been mind-blowing. I'll share a link to his book once it's out to everyone who's interested. Rudhir coaches really high-performing individuals in the legal profession. It's like partners. You're talking about senior associates. We first met 5 years ago in a leadership program, and he's really transformed my voice and really allowing me to step into that light. And even this project is part of it as well too. And so electric fences, I'm gonna keep thinking about that and what are the electric fences that we have in our lives, not just in work, but also on the personal side. It is those hard conversations. It is leaning into that, because at the other side of the electric fence is a lot of opportunity and a lot of growth. And so thank you, Rudhir, for being on the podcast. Thanks for sharing your insights. My other takeaway is just that intentionality that you have with your partner on journaling and also reflecting about this quarter. What does that look like? I need to do more of that, because I think it's important that we are on the same page and kind of navigate what that schedule looks like. I think in many of our lives, I'm sure with the listeners, right, it's busy, right? There is both work obligations, there's nonprofit obligations, there's side project obligations, and beyond that. And so I think having that initial viewpoint where we can be a big game changer. So Rudhir, I am so appreciative of this. For everybody else who's listening, check us out on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on YouTube. We're finally doing more videos on YouTube, and I want to thank Trixie for the help here. I also want to thank Baron. Baron's my podcast producer. He's been around with the team for the last year plus, and he's been a huge help with getting these shows onto the different platforms. And thank you to the listeners and to the followers. I appreciate you. This means a lot, and let's do this together. And with that, cheers. We'll chat again next time. Cheers. Bye.